layers in here. Again, creating that element of interest is such an important part of us, delivering an image that we think is appropriate. I'll look for natural framing, and as you can see here, I shot through some rocks on this here. But all the while, I want to be able to tell a story, so I'm thinking about my imagery from the standpoint of what can I tell the story with. And in this particular image, it goes up to about 100 degrees during the day and below freezing at night. Nothing lives there. But again, for me, one of the most magical places I've ever seen. Very difficult to get to. Requires four-wheel drive vehicles. You have to have two because then you won't get stuck in it. So again, if you're doing this, make sure you're with a guide that understands it. But some of the real magic that occurs at night. Now remember, I'm in the southern hemisphere, so the stars are a little different than what I might be normally used to seeing. And you'll notice there's two prominent stars in the upper left and the upper right. And I use the rock formation in the front to help me tee that up so I could kind of align that with you. So the question that begs to be asked too is, how did I light the rock in the front there? I didn't. Mother Nature did that. I had a half moon over my shoulder. Again, conditions were perfect, and yet I'm able to capture all those stars and making those alignments. You see the little slot on the left-hand side. I wanted to get that star right that was prominent there. Now here's one where I had a little man-made help. As I mentioned, we had two vehicles. And we asked one guy who had a walkie-talkie, he said, go over there and hit your headlights just for a second, because I wanted to capture the Milky Way. But again, without a foreground element, without that layer part of it, the image can be nice, but it's still not as interesting. So using a little creativity and a little man-made object in that respect helped me to produce that image. So the one country that I travel to the most is India. And for me, it's one of my favorite locations. I've been north, south, east, and west, every part of this area. This is in Kashmir, very troubled part of the world, and it's probably very difficult to go there now. It's really not that safe. I'm on the border of Pakistan here. I'm about as far north up as you can go. In the mountains, just absolutely enjoying the serenity of this, because there was very, very few people. And when you think of a country like India, most people don't have that perception. Here's another example where I was wandering by myself through this area. There's these beautiful homes. But again, you notice we talked about balance. We talked about, mood, if you will. All those things I'm thinking about when I'm looking for that photographic opportunity. So atmosphere is really one of the things I enjoy when I'm out photographing. And this very moody day, there was a break in the sky, and we were traveling to a different location. And you'll see the one sliver in the mountain that has the light hitting it. I am always looking for that type of opportunity where there's just a peak of light. That is my primary subject. But yet, I still have layers in the imagery and still accomplishing what I'm trying to get to. As I'm leaving that upper area up near the Pakistani border, this is traveling back into Kashmir. And again, looking down this, I did not see it coming up because again, I'm facing the other way. Message there, of course, look over your shoulder. And beautiful, serenity of this whole area, just a lovely, lovely location. So some of the areas, though, are a little bit challenging. I mentioned about having a guide who knows the turf, knows the area. These are the road conditions that we would travel in, so you do not want to attempt this without somebody that knows the turf. In many of the images here in that part of the country, I'm up between 12,000 and 17,000 feet. And again, if you like atmospheric conditions, it's an ideal place to capture this. And you can see there's a gentleman walking two horses down this road, and I'm completely engulfed in the clouds under there. But again, waiting for that magic moment to go in there where you can capture that. So, people look at this and say, is this Tibet, is this Bhutan? And no, this is northern India. This is what it's like there. Very, very sparse area. But we talk about that balance part to the photography. You notice we have a heavy weight on the right, a little bit of heavy weight on the left. So we're able to get that balance. I wanted the fringe of the prayer flags blowing in the wind with the foreground elements. Again, layers, balance, and all those components blending together. But it's also important to have an order of magnitude to understand how big these are. So in this particular case, there were two vehicles that were traveling with this. And if you look to the right in that crevice, you'll see, if you look closely, there's a white car, and that hopefully will give you an idea of the size of these mountains that are in this part of the world. And again, I did that as an establishing shot, so you, the audience, have an idea of what type of size that we're looking at. It's absolutely amazing to see some of this. And if you didn't know better, you might think this was out in the Midwest. Again, the northern areas, up in the Leh and Ladakh area of India, just an incredible location. So this is an image that I use when I'm doing teaching on layers in particular. And if you take time to study this image, you could probably count in excess of a dozen layers in this. The zone, as that structure on that mountain is called, is my primary subject. But if you look through this, you will see there's a whole series of layers, beautiful mountains leading back into, of course, the sky that's there. So again, you're going to get the hint here that that's an important part, at least as far as how I do things. So I mentioned about having that bright guide. Well, we thought we did, but we ended up getting stuck. Unfortunately, there was a little construction camp that was nearby, and these guys were kind enough to bail us out. So important to keep you with. South India, this is around Chennai and Kerala. Beautiful and extremely opposite from where I was in the previous images. I'm on the water, everything in Kerala for the most part. You travel on a boat that's around here. So I look for those nice daytime shots. There's a storm behind it, again, creating that mood, that atmospheric thing that I'm looking for. And then fast forward by a couple of hours, almost in the same location. Here I am just over my shoulder looking at, again, a completely different image. And you'll notice that there's a boater in the lower left-hand corner there. I had my composition set, waited for him to move into the frame, and then I have about a 2 or 3 second time frame in order to capture that. So of course time is important. So all the years that I've been going to India, everybody said, well, did you ever go to Taj Mahal? And it wasn't until just before COVID that I thought, I should do that. So part of that scouting, this is, of course, the Taj Mahal, but that's not what I wanted. But I used the time before this to scout it out, to see what my options would be. And I learned you can't get in ahead of time, there's nothing you can do. And the next morning, I got up an hour or two before the place opened up. I wanted to be the first person in there, and as fast as I could, I knew I wanted to at least try to get the iconic shot, and this is what I was able to accomplish. Because a minute or two later, tons and tons of people. So again, if you're going to any of those iconic places, the early bird clearly catches the worm here. This is in Rajasthan, and again, if I quick throw a plug, I'm going to be going there in February. If anybody's interested in wanting to see some of this, check out my website. It's going to be an amazing opportunity. But that balance part, there's a fort on the left, there's a palace on the left, and you want to have that balance. Again, for me, a very important part of this. So I talked before about separation. This is also in Rajasthan, and these herders were there, and I don't speak the language, but through gesture, you can try to communicate a little bit. But I wanted to capture them in their environment, but I can't ask them to move and pose for me, so I have to be the person moving about. And I was very careful. If you look between the two gentlemen holding the crutch there and the sheep, I worked real hard to move myself so none of those would overlap. So that was the point I was making about separation. So when you're looking at an image like this, you're not going to be in a position to change the scene. You have to change the scene by moving yourself. So again, be sensitive to that sort of opportunity. So let's move on to Cuba, another fun place to photograph, lots of colors. This is a part of the country where over my shoulder, is the kind of iconic shots. That's not what I wanted. I wanted a shot that would depict Cuba as I think I perceived it in my mind. This is actually about a 6-stitch image on the roof of one of the buildings there. And again, just trying to get all those elements together. A bit of a telephoto because I wanted to compress it a little bit, but again, by taking all those, I'm able to get all those elements in there. So for anybody who's been to Cuba, the main area there is called Malacan, which is an area where everybody meets and greets. And of course I wanted to get a couple shots, and I'm looking at it in the water, and I'm looking at that lighthouse, the clouds, everything was lining up. But the one thing I was thinking about was kind of odd. There's no boats in the water. Well, it's Cuba. You're not allowed to do that. So As I looked at this image, though, I thought, that lighthouse, I wonder if I could gain access. So the last day that I was there, I was able to get up into the lighthouse, and here's the result. This was my last day there. Mother Nature delivered this beautiful sky for me. That's the Malecon that you see down at the bottom part of this thing. And again, you can't time all that, but you can certainly try to capture it if the opportunity presents itself. So this is a shot that, this isn't really a landscape shot, but it's a shot that I think kind of depicts the elements of Cuba, specifically Havana, the old car, the carts, the people gathering, all the telephone and electrical lines overhead. So this is actually news that back in the day Olympus used in part of their marketing campaign. So let's take it to a different part of the world. Let's travel to Bhutan, an incredibly beautiful part of the world. It's, I don't know if it's the happiest place in the world, but in the top, they kind of rank themselves. There's success by a happiness factor. This is a scene that I saw the fog all engulfed around the trees, saw the prairie flags. I knew the sky was going to burn through. This was about a 15-second opportunity, and 16, 17 seconds later, the fog that you see around the starburst there was gone. You can't repeat it, so when you have those opportunities, obviously you don't want to miss out on that. So Tiger's Nest, and some of you may be familiar with that, again, one of those iconic locations. So from afar, I looked at that and I thought, wow, I'm hiking up there. Yeah. And I was thinking about as I'm hiking up there, how do I create a compelling image? What do I do from a compositional standpoint to make it interesting to you guys? And I saw those flags that were leading into that, and I thought, well, if I get myself positioned right, I can make the flags create a lead line. Hopefully it takes you right into the Tiger's Nest, and that's how I accomplished that. I will tell you, 2.5 hours later, I was huffing and puffing on this one. This was a tough one. So during that same trip, I like to go down to the villages and kind of mingle with the people, and I saw this lovely bridge with the background elements that you see there. Of course, at the risk of redundancy, see the layers in here. But I thought, let's get over to the bridge and see if we can't get this even a little closer up. So I saw the prayer flags. I wanted to shoot it from the side, and here it is. And I caught this young monk walking through, and if you look in the lower left, you see there's one leaning on the post. And on the right-hand side of the image, the flags are blowing into the bridge. Again, the point there is, see the distance, see the shot from the distance, get that image, but work the image and try and find some other angles that can make it even more compelling. So, if any of you ever travel with me, I'm the guy in the car who said, wait, stop, gotta pull over, and these are sort of the things that I look for. So, again, in the high mountains in an area like Bhutan, atmospheric conditions, beautiful, lovely trees, trying to make that composition work, but not letting those opportunities slip by. Again, here's an example where the fog's up at the top. I use the zone in the foreground as my main subject, and then the mountains and the fog and everything else that comes secondary to that. So let's travel to Mongolia, an amazing place. I went to Western Mongolia, which there is very rarely you see anything man-made. But in this image, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? You see the layers? And look at all the different colors, too. And unfortunately, I didn't have a dramatic sky, but I had a sky that I could at least work with. And complementing, we talked about, the contrast of colors and light. And this image, I hope, depicts that. And if you look real closely in the lower right-hand left, you'll see a little girt that the nomads will pick up and move on a periodic basis. And so I wanted to give you the shot in that regard. But what's interesting is it's so barren. And this is as far as I can see in 360 degrees. There's nothing man-made about that. But I went there with a different purpose and a different intent. I wanted to photograph eagle hunters. So I have a whole series on that. I'm not here to share this with you, but that's the reason why I was here. And just wonderful human beings. And again, it's an art that's dying, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to make a point to go there. So staying in Mongolia, here's an image of the Milky Way. And there's a handful of places in the world that I've been to where I felt like I could almost touch the Milky Way. And this is one of those locations. So again, how do I create a layer? How do I create a foreground element? And we had this tent, and what I did is I just took a little candle, put it inside the tent, so I have some layering to give me the foreground along with the beautiful Milky Way, and that's the result of the shot. And that's where I stayed. This is one of those live composites I was telling you about. This is a 3-hour exposure. Hit the initial release, and what live composite does is basically only measures new light. So anything, new light comes in, and then it'll never burn out, if you will. So I hit my flashlight for a little bit on the foreground girt that's there, went to bed. 3 hours later, set my alarm, got up, and this is the result of the 3-hour wait time. Obviously, look for the number starting to give me a reference point. So Iceland, I'm sure many of you have traveled there and you've seen a lot of images there. So during my travels there, I always am looking at the light. And if you look at this image, you can't tell where the light's coming from. And it was one of those rare opportunities where I could see the light bouncing back and forth off all of these different ice elements there. And again, trying to find the composition. Fortunately, because they're bouncing off, there was an automatic layering that's already in place, so I was able to take advantage of that. Again, another location in Iceland. This, I wanted a slow shutter speed. The water was receding at this point in the day back to the ocean. I had a little bit of light left, so I tried to find a location from a compositional standpoint where I could take advantage of that, smooth out the water. Hopefully your eye travels right into the back of those beautiful rock formations along with the sky that you see there. So when I'm in an area that I've not been to before, in this particular case I'm at the glacier, I will sometimes take a video just so I can share that with you guys and also share with you what my mind is doing when I'm in an area. As I'm panning, I'm looking, and that thing in the lower left-hand corner of the image really caught my eye. So I thought, I'm going to make that my primary subject. And you look at this and the colors don't seem right, but I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, that was what was going on there. Incredible blues. And again, I wanted to make that main focus point, that alien-looking structure with the Mother Nature delivered beautiful sky right behind it. But as I looked at these in the glaciers, I also like to take little vignettes. And so I moved into different parts of it. And these things are probably 30, 40 feet in height if you put it in perspective. But without a man-made element there, you can't really tell what the size of these are. And here's one, you've heard of Diamond Beach there. And this is an image that I really had challenged, and I said to myself, I want to figure out how to do that. That's one of those icebergs that is, with each wave, it kept falling over and coming back up, falling over. I liked it. I wanted to capture the water just before it hit the iceberg. I wanted a slower shutter speed, and you can't do that if you're going to have something that's moving all the time. So there was that fine balance of catching the ice, the water, just before it. And I'm not going to kid you, I didn't get it on the first shot. It took me a couple shots to finally nail it down, but I was able to do that. So, arguably one of the largest waterfalls, it is the largest waterfall area in Iceland. And people ask me, what time of the year do I go? So, for a lot of people it's not appealing, but I will find out what is the coldest days of the year. And the reason being is I find it's going to give me the best compositional opportunities with snow and ice, and also a few amount of people. So that's my sweet spot in a location like this. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner of this image, you'll see there's one person in the image, and in a place like Iceland, it's really gotten crowded now, so it's a rarity to be able to find that opportunity. And of course, you're not going to go to a place like this without capturing some of the aurora borealis. But again, same techniques that I mentioned early on apply: foreground, midground, background. You want to have all of that in check when you're looking to do an image like this. So one of the trips I wanted to focus on the ice caves. And this is a quick video inside one of the caves, but what I'm doing is I'm focusing on the textures and the patterns in the cave as opposed to the big picture. I still want to get some shots of the big picture, but I started to focus on just little vignettes and pockets and corners. And it was just amazing to me. If there was a blue tiger, this is what it would look like to me, if you will. And it had the coarseness, and there was some frost around it. Same time, just move 10 feet away, and you have this silky, soft glass. But yet, I still want to put it in context, so what I want to do is then, I asked two of the guys who were with me to stand at the opening to the cave, so I can give you, the audience, an idea of where I am in a sense of place, if you will. So, again, that guy in the car, he's driving along, and I yell, "Wait, stop the car." This is another example. This is a quick video right after I jumped out of the car. I saw this body of water. It's really not a body of water, it's actually ice. But just the size of it was amazing, and I wanted to go down to the water's edge and see if I could find a composition. So I ran down there, and again, looking for those layers, looking for foreground element. The skies in ice, and if you catch it right, just do magic, and you can see the reflections in the ice. The main part of the ice, of course, juxtaposition with the foreground, and then ultimately the mountain in the background. So here's an old farm I found, and again, in this case, I'm using what is called daytime light composite. I put a 10-stop ND filter on. This is probably about a 2-minute exposure. I wanted Mother Nature to paint the sky for me. And I thought the structure was lovely, and the road was right behind me, so it was relatively close. But a lot of times what I'll do is, after I look at this, I think sometimes the color can be distracting. Let's focus more on the composition, and by doing that, I convert it into a black and white. Again, I like both of them, you decide, but those are some of the thought processes that I'm looking at and pondering when I'm out and about. Now here, if you look at the bottom of this image, this is not going to win any awards. What this is again, to give you an idea of place. That's an ice island that's probably about 3 or 4 blocks long, and I thought, man, that looks interesting. I don't know how safe it is, but I'm going to go down there. I found some of the most amazing structures on this floating block of ice. These things look like time machines. The sky got crazy on me, and these openings, and I have to assume these things just jutted up through the ice. And of course, this is one of those situations where I mentioned earlier, you're not going to go back next year and try to duplicate the photograph because it's not going to exist anymore. So again, at the risk of redundancy on that, also, you have the opportunity, you're interested in exploring, and check it out. This is one of the iconic locations there. Everybody said, well, why did you make the water so blue? I didn't make the water so blue. This is exactly how it is. But you can't really tell the height and size of these, and so, well, maybe what I should do is zoom in a little bit and get more of a vignette of that. And to put it in perspective, that those walls are probably about 20 feet in height. Of course, I'm shooting at slower shutter speed. I wanted to create that dreamy effect. But it's still not giving you a real sense of place. So what I decided, I'm going to hike down to the base of one of those, take some of the ice features, make that my foreground element, and still get the water in the background. Again, just as part of my storytelling to give you an idea of how I was able to capture that. So my last day in Iceland, I'm leaving. I see somebody just freshly plowed the snow in this image that you see here. Look at the beautiful leading line into the church. Mother Nature's given me this incredible sunset. Again, one of those opportunities. Pull the car over the side of the road, and again, it's amazing some of the things that you can find. So just this past year, I had an opportunity to spend some time out in the Pacific Northwest. This is the Hoh Rainforest in Washington State. I could spend hours and hours in this place, and it's almost overwhelming. When you're doing rainforests or things like that, once you're subject, there's so much chaos, and it's trying to reduce that chaos down. Picking a primary subject, trying to get the composition, and my intent here, wanted to get that starburst that was peeking through there. Of course, I closed down my aperture to get that. And then the tree, the fern, and then the secondary parts of it lead back in. So again, when I'm looking for an opportunity like this, that's what's going through my head. This is in Oregon, Smith Mountain. Beautiful, beautiful mountain range. It was just the colors in the sky were magical. But I was waiting for the light to hit the mountains themselves, and it wasn't quite doing it. So I thought what I would do, I'll go down to the water's edge and see if I can't find something else of interest. And in this particular case, there was some wild roses that were growing. And I used focus stacking so that I could get both that rose, which is only a foot away from my lens, in tack sharp. I want the grass, I want the mountains, I want the clouds, everything else to be tack sharp. So again, I did some focus stacking in order to accomplish what my goal was with this. So climbing up on some rocks, again, I love the atmosphere. again, some of these may not be the smartest ideas I've had, but a little bit of a short time frame. You can see there's some water in that puddle that you see on either side here. And yes, I got wet, but I was very happy with the results. So you got to get the iconic stuff along the Oregon coastlines, and this is one of those where, again, try and find that natural frame, beautiful green grass that's on top of the mountain, but I wanted more. So I mentioned about being curious. I mentioned about being creative. So all of that wood that's on the shoreline, I thought to myself, let's go exploring that, and maybe I could peek underneath one of these pieces of wood and remember that green top just for a minute, and I could find my golden egg underneath there. Well, sure enough, I peeked underneath, and I found that stone wedged between the wood, and the way the light was bouncing off, there was my golden egg. Now, do you recognize the greenery in the background there? I have layers, but because of my curiosity, I'm able to find images like that. So again, open your mind when you're in these locations. Let's take a quick run over to Lofoten and the fishing villages here, and beautiful part of Norway. To me, this is kind of like how Iceland was 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's going to start seeing more people because obviously it's getting a lot of PR. Just a magical place to photograph. Similar composition opportunities that you have in Iceland, but not near the amount of crowds, but at the same time, there's not near the amount of amenities, and so if you're willing to forego some of the amenities, you can find some really wonderful opportunities. This is a fun shot of these, I don't know how many, 8, 10 of these residential rate units. I did a 60-second exposure. So one of the water, the flat, and one of the sky. So people ask me what's the largest enlargement ever made, and if I can just pause for a minute here. I have, this was reproduced at 60 feet long, and I'm being a little sarcastic because I made it into a billboard. It was an art contest that I got into. So I have this image at 60 feet long. So somebody has said, well, you can't really make a large print with the micro four thirds. I'm here to make that with you. So if you want to go bigger than 60 feet, you should probably reconsider it. So I hike up here and I see all these fish. So what they do is they hang the fish to dry in anticipation of the preparation that's necessary. And I thought to myself, well, how do I create an interesting element there? Make note of that rock formation in the back. So what I do is I go down there, and so I figure I'm going to just walk underneath, get some video shots of this. Do not do this unless you're prepared to spend an hour or two in your room when you get back cleaning off your jacket. So not a smart move on my part. But what I did do is I came back out. This is what I wanted again. I wanted all those fish heads that are hanging there staring at me. Remember I said, remember that mountain range in the back? That's the back. And that beautiful hue of orange and gold over the top because the storms keep moving in and out on a frequent basis. Here's an early morning shot. Just love the rays. Look at the color of the water. And again, you're not going to get that at noon of the day, but also introducing those same compositional elements that I mentioned earlier on. So this is a pretty iconic shot anymore now. So this is one of the fishing villages, and you see the boat going back, and I call that, running from the storm because there was a storm coming in. I had my preconceived idea. I wanted to photograph this with a slow shutter speed, and I see this storm approaching, and I set up my tripod, got the shot, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted to wait for the lights to go on inside the building, so I waited a little bit longer. Things started to change. I changed my position ever so slightly. You see the beautiful color that was bleeding through in the back. A minute later, the storm comes in. I'm getting pelted with rain, snow, ice, and sleet. If the lights ever went on, I have no idea. But anyway, I'm still happy with the results that came from this. Here's an example where, again, I'm using the bridge as a leading line. There's a huge storm behind that mountain you see there. It got washed out a minute or two later, so don't hesitate again, as I say, when you have the opportunity to shoot this. Here's an example of where I wanted focus stacking. That little shell you see in the middle of that kelp that's there, I wanted that sharp, I wanted the rock sharp, I wanted the water sharp, I wanted the mountain sharp, and I wanted the clouds to have all the definition. How do I do that? Again, I did some focus stacking in order to accomplish that. Again, also, as you saw in Iceland, beautiful Aurora Borealis. I wanted a foreground element. The frozen lake that you see in the foreground worked great because it gave me great reflections on that. So, real quick on to the Dolomites. If you ever had the chance, you have to see this location. It's beautiful. You've probably seen many of the iconic shots. I had an opportunity to test the OMEG 5 pre-production model to see how it would floor. These are 50 and 80 megapixel high-res shots that I'm taking with my little tiny camera that has given me results that have so much detail. Here's an example of one that, again, when I create my own image, I've not seen this before. Early morning, the sun comes up, and the colors that you see there, that's what was there. They only last a couple minutes, of course, and then they're gone. But again, some of the iconic shots, you'll notice where the light is on the mountains. You'll notice, of course, the little church that's there is lit and in the shadows. We have all those layers that are taking place in the image here. Daytime light composite. I let Mother Nature paint the sky for me. This is probably about a 35 to 45 second exposure, all done in the compliments of Mother Nature for me, so I didn't have to do anything in post on that. Looking for those leading lines, you see the boats at the bottom. I wanted it to take you into the area. I was there in spring, which is their fall, because we're at the, I was there in spring, which, was their fall, and the ice, the glacier that you see up on the left, I wanted your eye to travel into that area. So my last day there, we had one more sunrise that we were going to shoot, and this is an 80 megapixel shot of this incredible magical sky. Again, you can't time it, you can only be lucky to be prepared. So near here, and again, many of you have probably been to this location, and if it isn't obvious at first, I'll tell you what it is. I wanted to travel to this location for many, many years, never had the opportunity. I wanted to find the unique perspective of this location. I saw that heart in the pool, if you will, with the beautiful light all around it. Also, again, shooting high-res here because I didn't have the opportunity. So this was my take on a different shot of the location that probably many of you know, which is Watkins Glen. I still wanted to capture the iconic shot. The only way you're going to do these without a whole ton of work in Photoshop is get there in the parking lot before the sun comes up. Get your tail up there, had a little bit of rain, it was perfect this day up there. So the real challenge with some of my equipment is in places like Patagonia. So I was there just a few months ago, a magical, magical location, but a real test of equipment. Of course, you wait, Mother Nature changes. This isn't Tornado County. The light is hitting just the right moment, so I had to wait for that golden hue, and that's when I want to capture it. But let's move a little bit. This is, again, the iconic shot. Let's go down closer to the water on a different day than I shot it. And again, same location. I'm probably 100, 200 feet away, but you have a completely different view and vision of this just by changing what is relatively short distance. This is the back side of it. And again, this is another focus stacked image where I wanted the driftwood that you see there, that stone structure in the center. Those are my layers for the image. And true confession, I did lose the driftwood a little bit. Again, part of getting that right image. So here's the real magic. So this is a 2 o'clock in the morning hike up to this area that, again, just blew my mind. Probably one of the prettiest spots I've ever seen. And this is 2 images, though. The bottom foreground, I had about a 2-minute exposure because I wanted some definition of that. I can't light it because it's really far away. And then the Milky Way, I shot that, and it's about 20-second exposure. Of course, one of them again, and this is what we had. So I packed my gear and leave. Wait a minute. This location has magic that I have never seen anywhere else in the world. So an hour or 2 later, this is what showed up. And so people say, oh, this mid-journey, did you do, what did you do? It's like, no, this is what was there. The colors you see, the skies that you see, well, thank you. But anyway, a very magical place. So the point to that is don't be tempted to leave too early. So a few more shots of that same location. Here I am getting a little closer. You can see the skies are starting to change a little more because the sun's coming up. Let's back up a little bit more and maybe get the 2 mountains together. And here you can see the sky is becoming more and more illuminated. So that magic time, short opportunity, but again, it's amazing what you can do. So here's what I want you to just take a quick look at this. See this big body of water in the foreground and the mountains in the background. How did I do that? Well, again, as photographers, we can kind of trick the eye a little bit. And here I am photographing that little puddle that you see in the foreground there to get that in the background. And again, with a wide-angle lens, you can create an illusion that most people can't see unless you're sticking your head down in there. So again, that's part of that creative part. Mount Fitzroy, a beautiful image. I saw the fence. I wanted to be a leading line to take me into that mountain. The next day, I was going to be at the base of that mountain. Now, it's fall there, our spring, it's fall there. I have no idea what the colors are going to look like, what to expect. Again, up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, hiking up in pitch dark. I have no idea what to expect. There's no opportunity to photograph, to scout it ahead of time. I get up there, the sun comes up, I look at the colors. Oh my gosh, I was absolutely blown away. Found the location for the composition. The one challenge, the one thing I didn't care for is the cloud-covered Mount Fitzroy, the peak of it the whole time. A different vantage point just a few minutes later, and look at the vibrancy of the fall color. Just magical. So as I leave Patagonia, let me take you to a place I just got back just a couple weeks ago. My first time in New Zealand, a magical place. I was able to grab just a couple shots here I want to share with you. This is 10,000 ISO. Thank God for the sensors we have today and the post-processing abilities that we have, and I'm able to create that. I mentioned I like atmospheric conditions. This is what I was able to capture in several locations. That's Mount Hope on the upper left. Another focus stack image that's here. And again, a guy in a car that yells, "Pull over." I saw the leading line for the road that you see, or the pathway there leading me up to the sky. Again, I'm always looking for opportunities like that. Similar here with the beautiful fog that you see in the valleys. And the rainforest, it's wintertime there. It's below freezing. I've never been in a rainforest before where I saw greenery like this. And again, here I'm using the ferns to create a leading line into my primary subject. And that's what my intent was with this image here. And there was a woman in our group that had this beautiful red jacket, and I asked her, "Would you mind standing around the peninsula in this mist that was on the water?" She was kind enough to oblige. And as I stroll down the stream of New Zealand here, ladies and gentlemen, let me say thank you very much for your attention.
A couple of questions. After this session, you can catch Frank outside the speaker meet and greet table. So you can a little bit more, maybe share a little bit of your work and your story. So there's one up front, then I'm going to come to the back. Thanks, Frank. Are there any general information you can share about your post-processing? You mentioned Photoshop, so just things you do in lighting, saturation, sharpening.
Absolutely. Great. The question is, about the post-processing part of the imagery. So it actually has a precursor to the question that I feel is important, is to get it right in the camera, number one. So I'm photographing for highlights, so my shadows are typically very deep, so I'm not trying to struggle with that. But my workflow is, it goes into Lightroom, and and with the new masking algorithms that are in there, the bulk of what I'm completing now is all done within that realm. And then from there, if there's any little minor cleanup that I do, then I'll take it into Photoshop. But I would say 75 to 80% of my workflow now is in Lightroom. Good question.
I wanted to ask, because we saw a lot of photos from different times of day. Do you have a favorite or a preference of time of day that you seem to get more shots?
Well, yes, and the answer to that is morning. Even though I'm not a morning person, I push myself. That's where the magic happens. You saw this, where I did the Milky Way at night, just bled into the morning shots. Of course, the evening shots, I avoid the high noon times, but a lot of times we're delivered an opportunity that we can't change. We have tools that we can work with. I do a lot of exposure bracketing in situations where I have challenges like that. And again, it's just being very sensitive to what's in the histogram and everything else. But morning is by far and away. For landscapes, the sweet spot. Good question.
Frank,
Yes, sir.
could you get a little bit more technical about the focus stacking as far as like lens and differential and
Sure. So in the OM system, which I shoot, I have mine preset for about a dozen shots. I rarely use a dozen of them. I will focus on my very closest point, and it's automatic in camera. It'll take two exposures beforehand. It'll come closer to me, and then the remainder are to the rear. And then in Photoshop, what I'll do is I'll identify each one and decide which ones I'm going to stack, and I'll do it in post. I rarely use, what the end result camera would produce, even though there's some really good stuff for that. But for the most part, I'll take it into post-processing and analyze it, and then make the stack from there. Okay. The stacking part in Photoshop.
Frank, I know you said you're getting away from tripod, but when you're photo stacking, are you always using tripod?
Nope. Again, the image stabilization, I've got 8 stops of image stabilization, and I'm not worried about the blur, and I've got enough that I can hold it steady. Might position my hand on a rock or something, and a little bit of movement, I can correct in Photoshop. Yeah.
One more time, a round of applause, Frank T. Smith. As well, and thank you so much.
Okay, I'll be at the booth if you have questions.